said, yeah, so you didn't listen. It's bright. It is bright.
Good morning. So for those of you who do not know, Drew Lewis, Jonathan Wiley, we lead the class action mass tort practice group here at DISCO, focus exclusively with plaintiffs' firms with a concentration in mass torts and class actions. We have the honor today of talking with someone who's not only been a phenomenal client, but someone who is a dear friend that just is one of the best people that we've run into in our years of working in the plaintiffs' firms. JoDee is a true white hat. I'll let her tell her story. But JoDee Neil from Simon Greenstone in Dallas has joined us. JoDee, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Jonathan and Drew.
So let's start at the beginning. So we meet you a few years ago. We got introduced to you, I think, by the folks at Brandstone.
Correct.
Kind of tell us, what you do, what your background is, how you got to the point of sitting here with us today.
Right. Great question. So I grew up in my father's legal practice. He practiced criminal defense and family law. He was a trial lawyer. And I, after law school, became a prosecutor, and I specialized in white-collar crimes and crimes against children. I lived in Singapore for several years, where I worked with nonprofits in Southeast Asia, developing child protection systems. And then when we moved back to the States, I went directly into plaintiff's practice. After a couple years, I was recruited into Simon Greenstone Panettiere, which is where I still practice. And for a while, they had me assigned to the mesothelioma group, working on asbestos cases, which wasn't the best fit for someone with my background. Very important work, just the science didn't resonate with me. I was sitting at an attorney training, and Jeffrey Simon was giving a speech, slides about what we knew at the time about the opioid litigation. And this was in December 2018. Now, my mother passed away from a prescription drug overdose in 2010, and I had struggled with a lot of anger throughout those years, really blaming her for being an addict. But when Jeffrey was delivering his presentation, it occurred to me that there were so many corporate forces that put these pills in front of my mother, put these pills in front of my friends, in front of me. And in a moment, I was just washed with forgiveness. And that day, I asked the leadership at the firm if I could be transferred into the opioid division, and I was, and here I am. That was 5 years ago.
And you've shared that story with us numerous times, and every time you do, it's the same goosebumps on my. Yeah. It's the personal nature of it, but your kind of dedication to that. Jonathan, are there little things?
Yeah, Tom, we were meant to have a clicker. We didn't get it.
It's okay.
Anybody? Anyway, so while they work on that, so like you, I think the opioid epidemic has probably touched everybody in this room in some way, shape, or form, but I don't think everybody understands the case. So tell us a little bit about the case, who's involved, what's at stake, and why it's so important.
Sure. The opioid litigation is brought on behalf of counties, entities. Simon Greenstone Panettiere represents more than 50 counties, including Dallas, including Smith, Nacogdoches. There's so many. And we filed these lawsuits on behalf of Texas counties against, first, without the data, it was Allergan, Johnson & Johnson, Endo, and the big three, which is McKesson, Amerisource, and Cardinal. At that time, we did not have access to the ARCOS data, which we now have. And so, these lawsuits were filed all over the country, and a federal MDL was developed coming out of Cuyahoga County in Ohio. Well, at the same time, the Texas MDL was developing, and it eventually became assigned to become an MDL out of Judge Schaefer's court in Houston. Several months went by. We worked on an ESI protocol, coordination order, protective order, et cetera, and finally he chose a bellwether. And the bellwether that he chose was Dallas County. Of course, I wanted this as one of Dallas County's lawyers. In April of 2019, I met Jonathan and Drew, and the documents started coming in. And it was raining terabytes on us. And a couple months later, we became a bellwether. And after that, it was game on. Just, I mean, just imagine the most insane discovery of all time. I mean, it was just bananas.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of those numbers in a moment. Yeah.
Well, that's actually perfect. So what I often will think about is like the very first conversation we had, and we're on the phone, and I'm talking terabytes and this, and you're like, okay, stop. Like, explain this to me. What does this even look like? Like, what does a terabyte look like? And we kind of go through this. I mean, like, when you began, you didn't come from the discovery. That was not the background. You have overseen one of the largest document review, collection, production process I've ever seen. It's a massive case. Tell us about kind of how you got tapped with doing the discovery and how that has evolved over time.
Yeah, I tend to be a person who says yes. I was asked by Shelley Sanford, do you want to be on the admin team for the DISCO database? Yes, sure I do. What's that?
Right.
And
no idea what you're signing up for.
no idea what I was signing up for. And what I've learned since then, and what I suspected at the time, was anything that the big important lawyers don't want to do, dive into that. Because that's where you create real expertise and value for the case. And so that's what I did. Just really dove into the database. And I'm really, really lucky to have developed a relationship with Drew and with Jonathan, who got me through it. And of course, Joey Arginal. And, between the three, I had the support to take on this task, which was far bigger than anything I had ever contemplated in my life.
Think about all the phone calls, and there were so many things along the way, right, that weren't. You're not even like when you're thrown into the deep end there, like you're not even thinking about those things.
I didn't even know what a terabyte was. Drew pulled out his phone and showed me. He pulled out Amazon. I was like, "What is it, like the size of a room or something?" And he's like, "No," and he showed me this was a terabyte.
Yeah.
So along those lines, that starting point, daunting. I don't think you even knew how daunting it was. We knew what was coming for sure, just having been immersed in discovery for the better part of our careers. Did we do anything as a team? You mentioned Joey. This is pre-DISCO U. DISCO U was not a thing. Knowledge base was not a thing. It was all...
Joey was the lead project
manager. Yeah, Joey was a project manager at that time. So how did we help you kind of lessen the severity of the learning curve? I remember some sessions that we did, but talk to us a little bit about kind of how you go from not knowing much about anything in terms of DISCO, discovery, the volume of documents to kind of leading up to where we are today.
I recall DISCO offered the administration team a free training, and so we did one training here in Austin for, I think there were 5 of us who were on the admin team. And we learned, really basics about how to set up different review stages and who has what access and whatnot. And then we had a big training in Dallas, also provided by DISCO at no cost, where we had about 40 lawyers and paralegals and different legal support staff. And Joey was there, y'all were there, and we really just knocked it out. And then along the way, of course, I had your cell phone numbers, and I used those a lot. Same with Joey. We worked around the clock. It was not uncommon to be ingesting drives in the middle of the night. I'd wake up, check on it. There'd be an email from Joey. Saturdays, Sundays. I mean, it was a 24/7 operation, and we had so much support from DISCO. That's really what carried us through that very trying time.
Well, and so the other thing I think it's interesting about when we started this, I mean, at that point, I guess the AI would have been in there, but it'd be pretty early in the release. You don't have DISCO U. There's not a managed review service yet. There's so many things that today are part of the company, no timelines, no case builder, things like that. Talk about that process. I mean, you've seen us evolve from when we started the platform to what it is now, and we'll get to Cecilia here in a little bit, but talk about that experience and kind of the importance of being that one-stop partner where it's like we can grow with you to scale.
Sure. We started out using, I forget what it's called. We're AI responsiveness. So I know that there were too many documents for us to actually review. It would have cost several $1 million to get all the documents reviewed. And so we had to figure out a way to narrow the document population. And so we leaned on DISCO tools, which at that time were, again, I'm just blanking on what it's called right now. And then y'all pitched the document review team, and we started doing math, and we looked at other vendors, and y'all gave us a great deal. And it just made so much sense to have our reviewers also at DISCO. It made everything so seamless. And I was able to train the DISCO reviewers, the volunteer reviewers, and utilize Joey, Drew, Jonathan, and all the DISCO support in that process as well. Once depositions began, Case Builder was a no-brainer. I mean, once I saw that you could copy and paste a deposition straight into a Word doc, I was like, sold. This is our product. We need this. And it has come in so handy, especially when we need to very quickly find, statements and testimony to use in our interrogatory responses or motions for summary judgment. It was fantastic for that. Now I'm really excited to be one of the beta tests, I guess, for Cecilia AI, and we've got some exciting plans for how we're going to utilize that tool in our documents.
Well, and I think the idea all along, right, was like if you built out this kind of platform, an entire ecosystem of products and solutions, then you can kind of meet the demands of a case like this. I mean, kind of, I guess maybe do a thought experiment for us here live. Like, how would you have done this case? Okay, a high watermark is what, 40 plus terabytes of data, hundreds of millions of documents, the number of, and the fact too that the data has just been there for years. Kind of, what would you even say, like, how would you have gone about this without it? I mean, we've talked about it before, like, you don't know how you would have gotten through it, but like, what would have been the plan if you didn't have all these tools?
I mean, I can't even really go there. We would have failed.
How many depositions total?
Yeah, we were talking about that behind
in that.
Yeah.
We did, this is during the pandemic, we did 215 depositions in 90 to 100 days. We were stacked 7 and 8 deep on some days.
Think about that.
Yeah.
The volume, and then how you get those transcripts back. How would you possibly deal with that?
Oh, yeah.
That amount of testimony without something like Case Builder.
And really, where I love DISCO the most, and it's tough because I love DISCO so much, but the plaintiff side, the database for the client is where we really were able to get the case to a place where the defendants were prepared to pay. And they did, and we've been successful.
On that point.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because I mean, everybody knows about the opioid litigation, but the volume is truly staggering. I mean, it's phenomenal. Pull up our numbers here. Next one. Yeah, you guys can't see this, but we put in a picture. JoDee had this. Some of you there's so many people that have worked on these cases have seen this picture of JoDee with her FedEx Mountain. So the defendants would send productions encrypted hard drives. And what we're looking at that you can't see is a picture of JoDee standing next to her FedEx Mountain. So she would stack the boxes, and they are well above her head. Boxes to the ceiling, and those are all the individual productions as they came in. And it was kind of almost a trophy for us. So here are some of the numbers. At its peak, 40 plus terabytes.
Easy.
Now, 40 plus terabytes, and that, of course, that includes the plaintiff side stuff that our forensics folks helped collect, and that you all then had to review for production. I think we collectively logged 90,000 priv entries.
Yeah, and so many of those reviewers are still with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of documents from the defendants that we had to get through. This is one of the most staggering statistics. So the review team, I know Mayor's here, I think Sada's here somewhere. 48,000, this is to date, 48,453 review hours. That's what we've done to date. And I guess that's in just shy of 4 years, because
the review would have started
right
2 years ago.
Yeah, 48,000 and a half. Yeah, 48.5.
Our first DISCO review was for 378,000 documents. And I remember I cried under my desk when the bill came. Even at the amazing rate we had from DISCO, I'd never seen a bill that big. And I remember I got under my desk and just cried.
Well, this point on the bill too, JoDee, this is something that oftentimes is not readily apparent to our colleagues who don't work on the plaintiff side. Talk about this a little bit, because I think this is a critical difference. You have to be a good steward of your client's recovery. The money that you are spending out, okay, it's not a pass-through cost. It's not an insurer on the back end. It is coming out of the money that the counties, that your clients, individuals, counties, whomever will receive. How important is that difference, do you think?
Well, it's actually coming out of the defendants ended up paying for this.
Right.
The counties have no regressive tax. All the fees, all the expenses have been cut out from the county's recovery and paid for by the defendant's settlements. That was really important to the architects of the settlement agreements. And what was the rest of your question?
Well, just kind of about that difference, though, of how a plaintiff's approach to the expense. When you see that bill,
right,
I think it hits a little different.
Well, and you're funding it.
Yeah, you're funding it in real time.
There's no pass-through to a corporate client. They're funding it themselves.
Yeah.
It had to be done. It had to be done. But what I would say is that DISCO was so generous in helping us get to the point where we only had to look at what we really had to look at. We did not, employ reviewers to do fluff. We were able to run search terms, run them again, isolate these populations from this, and get it to where we really only needed to review several 100,000 documents, which was great compared to the, I don't even want to say the number of how many were in there. Yeah. With the defendants database, we've been really fortunate to be able to basically break out really specialized reviews. We never just went through and did a linear on everything. Obviously, with hundreds of millions of documents, that would have cost a small fortune. Instead, we have topics. Okay, we need to know about Johnson & Johnson's product, Nucynta, run some terms, spin up a team, let's find out what we need to know about this drug for this reason. So I would say it is an indispensable tool. I have told the clients that without it, I don't think we would have made it. And that's something that I am perfectly fine saying even as I sit here today.
When you talk about the review team, though, I think even that relationship has evolved. So using DISCO reviewers, I think, started out as more just, hey, we need help. We need labor. We need more eyeballs on documents. I can tell you we have a call twice a week.
Now it's twice a week. It used to be every day.
It used to be daily. Mm-hmm. But now that review team has evolved, and certainly Umair and Seda know this. I saw an email just last week where one of our reviewers made a suggestion on a search term and said, hey, well, why don't we try this? And you came back and you're like, that's amazing. But share a little bit about how that team is not just bodies reviewing documents.
Oh, absolutely not. We have designed over the years several specialized protocols. The opioid litigation brings in law enforcement privilege, juvenile document concerns, autopsy document concerns. There are lots of very specialized things that you need to know about, and our review team has so much institutional knowledge at this point. What you're referring to is CJ, who I adore. She's been with our litigation since the beginning, I believe. And I asked for a search to be done, and Nick Elton, he's fantastic. He was a part of this too. And on their own, they went and found the branded benzodiazepine names for this particular defendant's drugs, included that in the search, and it turns out there's some people in Dallas who were deceased from these very drugs, and I would not have known it but for their own initiative and institutional knowledge.
That's awesome. So one of the themes of Kickoff is about trying to become more client-centric. So we'll go a little off script here because as you're saying this, it reminded me of the other side to this, right? Sometimes it's always great and it's wonderful and everything is simpatico and everything's easy sailing. We've had some hiccups along the way. Right? There were some changes here or there, and again, you would call a lot of consternation, a lot of, hey, Drew, Jonathan, what's going on?
Well, when Joey went from PM to training.
Yeah, when Joey went
left.
First
big change, yeah.
You were like, Joey cannot leave. Joey has to be a PM. I'm like, well, Joey.
Y'all sat me down. Like you were going to tell me that someone had died. You were like, there's something we have to tell you. I was like, and all he did was move to engagement. But, Joey was like my warm blanket. And but Disco's never missed a beat. You got someone else in there, and she was fantastic. And there have been a couple hiccups since then, but we're always taken care of. And right now we're in the very capable hands of Kevin Savage and Nick Elton. Mm-hmm.
There he is.
And I'm just so grateful because I've never doubted for a minute that any of the DISCO employees working on our case, I've never doubted that they cared. I mean, it's just, it's you can see it from their actions and from their behavior that they're invested in our success and in the safety of the people of the state of Texas, truly.
And I think that's something that in prior kickoffs when we've talked and you had a chance to get together with colleagues, I think it is very easy in our industry. We can sometimes be jaded. It's like, it's just documents and you're looking at it from this distance, right? And it's just about the gigabytes and that's all you're thinking of. But I think that when you share those types of stories, it's like, no, this is real stuff. The work this is the end product. You're helping, fight, the good fight. So along those lines, let's talk a little bit about what you're excited about next. Tell us about kind of how you learned about Cecilia, the stuff we've gone through so far with it, and what are you most excited about turning generative AI on?
Yeah, when I heard about this, I was like, yeah, we need to get in on this. And so we are going, because our database is so large, what we're doing is we're deploying Cecilia in a particular defendant's, basically setting up a new matter that only has one defendant's documents in it. And, we're going to start asking questions. We have another defendant who's basically the same character as this one, a generic manufacturer, who will be coming off of a stay very soon. And I'm really looking forward to getting to know that defendant in this whole new way. Yeah.
Well, because I think one of the best use cases really can be in this kind of the initial triaging of it, right? Like getting the summary, what's going on in this data set, what did they know, and then again, guiding you towards like, well, this is where we're going to spend our time. We're not just going to start at dates 1 and go to the end.
Right.
So, yeah.
And the opioid litigation has developed over the years to such a point where there is a body of knowledge that's pretty standard across the board. For example, suspicious order monitoring. But generic manufacturers are their own special kind of beast. And then we had the particular generic manufacturer we've been working on lately, we had to put together a methadone case because they're coming in saying, hey, we're the saviors. Well, turns out you're shipping 75% of your methadone in Dallas to pill mills. So, we had to put that case together. We had to learn why methadone is dangerous. Why is it a Schedule II opioid? And we did all that in the defendant's database. And it was kind of like starting over again,
right.
In the very beginning where we had to put our heads together and learn and really develop a case. Mm-hmm. And DISCO came through for us yet again.
So along those lines, these defendants, first off, there's a ton of defendants. Mm-hmm. But these folks are household names. J&J, Allergan, Purdue Pharma, and then you've got like AmerisourceBergen and those folks. Cardinal, huge multi-billion-dollar companies with massively deep, bottomless pockets, and law firms that support them. How would you say that DISCO has been able to help kind of level that playing field? This is truly is kind of that proverbial David and Goliath. Goliath is all these manufacturers and distributors. you guys are funding your own case, but are there tools that DISCO has given you that have kind of helped level that playing field where you're confident going up against these massive AML firms, these multi-billion-dollar multinational companies?
Right. Finding the bad docs in the defendant's database is fun, and it's all fine and good, but when they come after you, they're asking you questions through interrogatories, RFAs, requests for production, and if you don't answer these questions, they will compel you, and you will find yourself in front of a judge having to maybe produce all the autopsies going back to 1990, which is what happened. It leveled the playing field because they really challenged us to prove some things that they didn't think we were ever going to be able to prove. And they thought that would get us to a lower number, or maybe just get us thrown out on summary judgment. But because we have this laser fast search capability, and because we're able to surf the plaintiff's documents the way we do, we were actually able to prove the things that they said we couldn't prove. And as a former prosecutor, I found that so satisfying, to be able to say, actually, McKesson, it was your pill that killed this person, and I can prove that.
Wow.
Amazing.
And it's sworn to.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is another one of these things that made this whole engagement unique. Is normally plaintiffs firms are receiving documents, right? It's you have the burden of proof. You've got to go through the defendant's production, and in the vast majority of cases, most plaintiffs don't have. If you're involved in a mass tort, like what do you have? You
medical
have to prove your medical records, and that's about it. That experience, I think when you and I talked, I said, I don't think you understand the magnitude of this isn't common for a plaintiff's firm. But I think that the other thing that may be lost on audience too is it's not just your firm. You're managing all these other people from other firms when you have these PSCs, Plaintiff Steering Committees, come together. Kind of speak to the challenges there and, again, how technology can make that process better, easier.
DISCO was great, not only about spinning up the DISCO reviewers, but also in helping our volunteers from the PSC. Well, I call them volunteers. They're billing hours, but they had to be trained too. And it was not uncommon for a DISCO review manager to not only be managing their own team, but to be helping the other teams along. And at one point, I think we had 7 or 8 teams going at the same time in different databases. I think I had 50, 75 people working in the various databases at one time. Everyone loved the product. It's really easy to plug people in, cut people out on occasion, and just keep everyone working, and to be able to see who's doing what. What are the metrics here? What's the burn down?
So, yeah, I'm looking at the time. So I want to let's talk a little bit briefly about just some outcomes, because all of this work that you've put in, and teams of people, scores of people on DISCO's side, but more importantly on your side, have committed your lives to the last 5 years. This is what you've lived. Talk a little bit, if you can, about some of the outcomes and kind of the impact that ultimately has. Why we're doing all this, right?
It's a dream come true. Right now, you can go on the Texas Comptroller's website. There's a Texas Opioid Council, and they are the stewards of the settlement monies that we've been able to recover, which is north of $2.8 billion as of today. Organizations are able to apply, treatment organizations like Nexus in Dallas. There's an abatement fund that is set up in regions. And, of course, Dallas is our clients. They're actually in commissioner's court planning what they're going to do with this money. It's stuff that we need, like Narcan, like funding an opioid task force, like getting the medical examiner the stuff he needs, because, oh my gosh, their data was so crucial to this case. And watching it all play out has just been a dream come true. I don't know what more to say.
Yeah. Any final words from you? I know this has been this is a career effort that you've had. Would you do it again? Remember,
absolutely.
So Shelly Sanford says, hey, well, do you want to do this? And you say unwittingly, yes, I'll do it. Would you do it again?
Depends on the case. You know, I was looking at some baby formula documents, and they're fine, I guess. But you know, something like this, absolutely, I would do it again. This has made me into a much better lawyer, a much sharper lawyer. I have expertise hardly anyone else has.
That's a fact.
Yep.
It's a fact, and yeah, I feel so blessed to have been at the right place at the right time, and to be the type of person who says yes. And failure's not an option. I'm gonna figure it out. Let's get it done.
Yep. The last thing I'll bring up is, so Jeffrey Simon was originally set to be here. So he has a book that he wrote. He has a podcast as well. You guys should go check it out. The podcast is fantastic. But so the book is Last Rights. We bought like 20 copies out there. First 20 people come get them. They're yours. It's a great book. I have started it, but haven't finished it yet. But want to definitely.
The back cover. That's
Yes.
Yeah.
I read the jacket.
And I would definitely recommend getting Jeffrey's podcast. It's called Outside Counsel. It's on every platform, and you're going to get some inside baseball from that podcast. I mean, he'll tell you all about the supply chain, all the good stuff. He brings in people and interviews them. And then, of course, this book is super important because I tell you, if the Second Amendment were treated like the Seventh Amendment, there would be riots in the streets. We've got to protect our Seventh Amendment, and we've got to keep our right to bring these lawsuits. It's really the last thing standing between us and corporate dominance.
Agreed. Round of applause for JoDee.
Thank you. Thank you all.